Okay, welcome back, writers. Today we're talking about opening sentences. And the reason we're talking about opening sentences is because for a lot of writers, that is the hardest part of writing, just coming up with that first sentence. And as readers, we all know that that opening sentence is all important because it can determine whether the reader stays with us or moves on to find a better opening sentence somewhere else. So how do we go about coming up with a great opening sentence? Well, experts tell us that the opening sentence should engage the reader. It should grab the reader's attention. It should make the reader want to read the second sentence. And my favorite, opening sentences are like mini skirts. They need to be long enough to cover the essentials, but short enough to keep it interesting. And that is all great advice. But how do we do that? Well, to make the process less stressful, there are a number of things we can do before we even think about an opening sentence. If we just take a little time to prepare, finding that opening sentence will be a lot easier. So before we start writing, we want to know what our message is. We have to have a clear understanding of what we want to say. This isn't something we want to be figuring out as we're writing. So before we think about an opening sentence, we want to know what our message is and how we feel about it. How we feel about it will determine the tone we're going to take. Knowing the tone is important because we need to maintain the same tone throughout the entire message. Are we optimistic, cautionary, skeptical? Whatever it is, we need to know before we start writing. We don't want to drift from one tone to another while we're crafting our message. We want to know who our audience is. Who's going to read it? What are their expectations? Are we trying to meet their needs, answer their questions, persuade them to our way of thinking? We need to know who our audience is. We want to have all relevant information at our fingertips: facts, examples, quotes, supporting documents. We want to do all that legwork ahead of time because we don't want to have to go searching for information once we sit down to write. Then we want to arrange that information in a way that's useful. Some writers use outlines, some use sticky notes, some prefer a whiteboard to organize their thoughts, whatever works for you. Finally, we want to have a sense of how our message should be structured. What is the logical flow? What needs to go at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end? These are all things we need to think about before we start writing because they all inform the opening sentence. Okay, so we've done our preparation. We're looking at the dreaded blank page and we need an opening sentence. But there are literally millions of sentences out there. How do we narrow it down to the one we want to use? Well, I find it helpful to think in terms of opening sentence strategies instead of specific opening sentences. And just think about that for a minute. Strategies instead of sentences. Let me show you what I mean. Let's look at some opening sentence strategies. One strategy for choosing an opening sentence is to state a broad truth or observation that's relevant to our message, like this one from an article about diversity in the workplace. Opening sentence: just like snowflakes, no two people are exactly alike. It's a broad truth. It doesn't specifically mention diversity, but it sets the stage for a conversation about unique talents of individuals. It's a good lead-in to a message about diversity. Another example of this strategy is from an article on innovation. Opening sentence: the need for improvement has driven progress since the beginning of time. It's a thoughtful observation, it's true, and it could easily be steered toward a conversation about innovation. So that's one strategy. Open with a broad, true statement that we can use as a springboard to our message. Another strategy is simply to ask a question. Open with a thought-provoking question that's related to our message. This one is from an essay on politics in a divided America. Opening sentence: do you think you're biased against people whose values are different from your own? It's thought-provoking, it gets your attention, and it's intriguing enough to make the reader want to stay and read more. Or this one from the business world, opening sentence, what if your next idea could revolutionize your industry? Great question. It's optimistic. It's inspiring. So posing a question is a great strategy because we are literally asking the reader to think about something, and that can be irresistible. Another strategy is to use a quotation. If we can find a quote that fits with the message we're crafting, this is a no-brainer. It's a ready-made opening sentence. Like this one. Author and educator Peter Drucker famously said, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." He was referring to business, but this quote could apply in any number of situations. It's motivational, and it could easily transition to whatever message we're crafting. I love this one from the introduction to a cookbook. Opening sentence, I agree with Julia Child, who said, "I don't trust people who don't like to eat." There are a million great quotes out there, and they're easy to find. So if you're struggling to come up with an opening sentence, using a quote is a great strategy. A strategy that you see a lot in motivational books and memoirs, but really could be used anywhere, is to share a personal experience or anecdote, like this one from Trevor Noah's memoir. I was 9 years old when my mother threw me out of a moving car. Okay, opening sentences don't get much better than that. Full disclosure, that wasn't the actual first sentence of Noah's book. That actually appeared in the second paragraph, but I actually think it should be the opening sentence because it's so strong and really grabs the reader's attention. In her book, Becoming, Michelle Obama opens with the sentence, I spent much of my childhood listening to the sound of striving. I love that. Instant curiosity. What the heck does striving sound like? Starting with a personal story or anecdote is a great icebreaker. It makes readers feel like they're having a personal conversation with the writer. This next strategy is used a lot in business writing, but with a little imagination, it could be used in lots of situations, and that is to present a real or hypothetical problem, such as, employee turnover is one of the biggest challenges facing companies today. It's an issue that many businessmen and women can relate to. It implies that the writer may have a solution, so it piques our curiosity, and it doesn't waste time getting to the point. In creative writing, you might start with a fictional problem, like, the kingdom was on the brink of collapse. The king hadn't left his drawing room in weeks. I don't actually know what a drawing room is, but the king hasn't left it in weeks, and apparently that's a problem. Stating a problem is a great way to start because there's no unnecessary small talk, just boom, here's what we're talking about, and we're off and running. This next strategy you don't see very often, and you definitely don't want to overuse it, but used judiciously, it is a great strategy, and that is to start with a single word. And I know that's not intuitive, but it will definitely get the reader's attention, and there's no quicker way to get to the point than with a single word. Infidelity. Most people are going to want to read more. Reincarnation piques the reader's curiosity. Daffodils, autocorrect, spreadsheets, whatever it is, we just want to think about our message and find one word that's relevant that will entice the reader to keep going. So you get the idea. Thinking in terms of a few manageable strategies is easier than trying to just pull a sentence out of thin air. It narrows down the pool and makes choosing a sentence easier. So just to review, some of the strategies that we talked about are to start with a broad truth or observation, a question, a quotation, a personal story or anecdote, a real or hypothetical problem, or a single word. And those are just some of the strategies we can use. You could come up with your own strategies, like share a fun fact or statistic. Start with an analogy, such as opening sentences are like miniskirts. Make reference to a famous event. Quote a song lyric. Reveal a surprise. Share a controversial opinion. As always, when it comes to writing, be creative. These strategies will help take the stress out of coming up with a good opening sentence, because there's nothing worse than sitting down in front of a blank page, agonizing over how to start. That's my tip for today. I'll see you next time.